I would like to thank you all for really great discussions over the last 24 hours. I'm sure this has been extremely useful for sharpening the focus of all of us, and especially for the Swedish government representatives and parliament representatives who've been here. And I think re-emphasizing the four priorities laid out both by Chair of the EU Commission, Hans Wallmark, yesterday, and just now by EU Minister Jessica Roswall, which is security, competitiveness, the green transition, and the rule of law and values. I think already with that we're on a good track. And if you add the willingness that has been expressed to use the little, but still the little margin there is for a presidency to actually lead, and to do so based on solid European values and with the mental awareness to also handle the unexpected, we have quite a good basis for the next 6 months. So from the discussions over these last 24 hours, I have picked up many good suggestions and quite a few interesting and excellent priorities. I've certainly not covered all, but I've picked up a couple of them. And I think that first of all, in all panels, we are signaling the awareness of the extreme severity of the current state in Europe and for Europe, and also the bleakness, frankly, of the outlook. We have an unprecedented number of challenges simultaneously currently ahead of us. Hans Wallmark talked about the biggest war in Europe since the Second World War, an uncertain energy crisis, and a galloping economic crisis. Diana Janse spoke about that the EU must be a more coherent geopolitical actor and that EU and NATO must work even closer together. Magdalena Gora spoke about seizing the reformist, and I think Roderick Parks did as well, seizing the reformist potential of the moment. In the panel on the future of Europe and values, we talked about the need to face the challenge of post-truth policies and democratic backsliding also within Europe, and that we need to realize that we need to pay for keeping up democracy and values, and that we need, among other things, to invest in civil society for that matter. In the panel on migration, we discussed the need for progress on migration policies, bad need for progress on migration policies, and the importance of working both with internal and external dimensions of this issue, and both in the long and in the short term. And then, of course, the importance of actually achieving a pact, where one way of going about it, even though it's extremely challenging and difficult, is to try to build trust and maybe to de-securitize the issue. Simply making migration boring was mentioned by some. And when it comes to the panel on climate and security and the climate and energy and the link between the two, I think that here one of the conclusions again is to think both in the long and in the short term, and that we need to be aware of the critical issue of our infrastructures and how do you connect resilience with safety concerns. And needless to say, there's a lot of rhetoric when it comes to green transition, but we need to close the gap between the rhetoric and the practice. On the highly interesting discussion on the reconstruction of Ukraine, it was said that Ukrainian resilience in the face of the Russian aggression really proves, among other things, first of all, the success of the Ukrainian people, but also the success of the EU neighborhood policies. And it is really important now that Ukrainian reforms are allowed to continue, both from within and with support from the outside. And it's simply, needless to say, we need to support now And if not for the fact that it's in Europe's interest to have prosperous neighbors in the view of enlargement, etc. So one thing there is that it's important to step up and set a plan for reconstruction. Now, create maybe a single agency or at least a single platform for that purpose. And another interesting discussion which has come up, as we all know, but was really emphasized as well, is that Russia must pay for its deeds, and how can we use the money that has been confiscated. And finally, the panel that we just heard on the EU in the competitive world. I mean, this is needless to say that EU needs to shape up and to sharpen its competitiveness, and in the meantime also collaborate with the rest of the world. And that one way of doing that is to base it on what is maybe EU's best assets, which is our values. And once again to strengthen our geopolitical role as EU. And I was relieved and glad to hear that Sweden is still a friend of enlargement. So this has been extremely rich. I have certainly not covered all in this brief summary, and there is a lot of things to consider still. We have taken notes from each panel, and we'll try to summarize that in one way or another. But before I wrap up, I really want to thank our sponsors again, and also the persons who have made this conference possible. So let me first of all reiterate my thanks and our thanks to our fantastic sponsors. It is the Prime Minister's Office here in Sweden, who have both provided funding but also extremely useful advice and they've been open to discussions along the way as we developed, or TEPSA friends developed the recommendations. And the same goes for the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, who've both provided financial advice and key financial support and been really open and great in the dialogue as we have planned for this conference. The EU Commission office here in Sweden was key, and without you and your excellent both advice and funding, it wouldn't have been possible. We all know of the dinner yesterday at the Stockholm City Hall, where we send a special thanks not only to the city itself, but also to President of the City Assembly, Olle Burrell. And last but not least, of course, the TEPSA Secretariat, Lucia, Jim, Mariam, and all the rest of you. It's really been great to work together with you throughout this process, and behind you we of course have also further commission funding, which is fantastic, and without it it wouldn't have been possible. But what would really not have been possible is if we hadn't had the fantastic UI team. First of all, under the leadership of Gunilla Herolf, and a big thanks to Gunilla. Gunilla is a veteran in TEPSA affairs. I think you said you were on the board for 16 years. It's actually the third time that you're organizing a PPC. Third? Is it second? Yes. Well, okay. Mark, I will come back to Mark. So, and you actually accepted to do this at short notice, and you've been invaluable to this. And this has happened in very close collaboration in the core team, which has prepared this, which is consisting of Amna Hansic and Ulla Lovchalic. Where are you, Amna and Ulla? Please raise. I don't see Ulla here. Ulla is busy fixing things. But also Julia Kviberg and Hedvig Pettersson have been key in making this possible, and a number of other UI staff. So why don't you raise and stand up, all the UI people who've been in, have a look in the back. You know, some of you were just dragged in from other important work for these 2 days, but without you it wouldn't have worked. I would also like to send a special thanks to the Sheraton staff. Do we have a representative from Sheraton here? maybe not, but they've been great in our collaboration with them. But last but not least, I'd also like to thank Mark Reinhard and Björn Fagersten, who have provided excellent advice as a sounding board for the preparation of this conference, and a special thanks particularly to Björn, because you are the guy who fixed all the funding early on, and now you step down from being the head of Europe program to do other things, still for UI, but without that essential groundwork, it would not have been possible. So, and finally, thanks to the amazing speakers, you've really been great. I've learned so much myself, and I think we should thank the Swedish government, actually, providing such a lineup of ministers, state secretary, head of the EU Affairs Commission in the Parliament, and all of you participants, of course. Thank you for coming up north in this chilly, part of the year and being with us. It's really been so good. So thank you to all of you for this. These are my final words. Over to you, Lucia.
Thank you very much, Jacob, and thank you very much for being with us at this last moment, the really last moment of the conference. So I will not take too much, but let me add some my insights. It's always challenging to address some closing remarks after 2 days of very interesting and important things addressed by experts. I mean, so just really few insights I would like to underline, that it is not only the European Union, but as well as the individual member states which are living unprecedented times, as had been mentioned during the sessions and during also the discussions in foyer. Our lives had changed overnight, and not literally, but in reality. And the history of this continent and the European Union had changed substantially. And I don't want to be too much sentimental or normative, but beyond all the negatives of Russian invasion to Ukraine, this experience stitched the European countries together. The quick response, the strong message addressed in unity, is one of the very important points. And as well as the connected structural approach on sanctions, as well as related need to accelerate the green transition as a tool for fight energy dependency on Russia, and to represent at the end some kind of light in the tunnel where we are heading in these crucial times. And we heard, as mentioned by Jakob, many fruitful contributions on all these topics. And based on them, but also based on the other factors, we all are aware to sustain in efforts to support Ukraine in their fight for our values. Meanwhile, we need to sustain in implementation of EU priorities and policies, including mentioned energy transition, economic efficiency, human-centered migration policy, to this new reality we are living in the moment. And to address all these points, European Union need to rely on strong member states. Although every member state is part of this family, there are many national issues which may influence the EU position. And it is the double-channel communication and the role of the country presidency which is crucial to second the EU institutions' agenda to be implemented properly. And therefore, the incoming presidency of Sweden will play also the crucial role to address both the European unity as well as the national support which is needed. And as mentioned yesterday, at the hosting City Council, it is the house of democracy. And I believe that the European Union is also our supranational house of democracy. And we may have differences in the views, in the agenda, which should be then discussed and addressed, but in the external communication and action, we have to stay united. And we have to stick with the European fundamental values, as addressed before, and we should be those who write the scenario of future of Europe and the future of European Union itself, including the strategic partnerships, strong neighborhood policy, and effective communication with the candidate countries. The European Union can be only as strong as it is able to address the needs of those who are in the need. internally as well as externally. And I believe that also the fruitful discussions throughout these 2 days may contribute to raise the awareness of a need to stay strong, even if we are facing the new reality, even we are facing the challenges and threats which are substantial for the daily life of every individual. And thanks for that, for hosting the conference, for making the space and time to address these questions. And thanks to especially Jakob and the Institute, the Swedish Institutes of International Affairs, to make it possible. And I believe that the incoming minutes and hours, you will be able to rest a little bit. And for that purpose, let me, in the name of TEPSA, thank you. Thank the amazing team which had been already mentioned. And I believe that when we are coming from Belgium, the original seat of the chocolate, this can help to rest more efficiently. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's good for you get happy from
Yeah,
chocolate, don't
yeah.
you?
The happiness from chocolate, the small moments make our life.
But before the chocolate, we actually have lunch.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
So why don't you all rise from the TEPSA secretariat so we can we can thank you properly as well.